and welcome back to Crazy Dave's Kitchen, where today we're making rustic Italian bread. I realized after the last video that we made that I didn't really have, I said that the soup would go great with some nice bread, and I really don't have bread other than the French bread. So let's get into making some Italian bread today. As far as ingredients are concerned, we have 3.5 cups, nice pause, I know. 3.5 cups of bread flour. I have 1 package of dry active yeast. I have 2 teaspoons of sugar. I have 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And I have 1 teaspoon of salt. I also have 1 cup of warm water. Warm between 120 degrees is considered warm. And of course, we have the stand mixer. I also have a little bit of cornmeal here, but that's going to come later after the dough rises. So we're going to just start out with our stand mixer and add in our flour and our salt, our sugar, all the dry ingredients. The yeast, of course, we're not going to get much of a rise of the bread with that. Without that, we're going to add the oil, and then, of course, the water, which we're going to add the water while we drop it in and, well, it mixes. That's classic. That's a classic move right there. All right, so we're going to put the dough hook in, and we're going to go ahead and get that mixing. And while that's mixing, we're going to just add the water. And eventually, while this is mixing, it's going to, you kind of know the drill from previous episodes. It's going to form a ball. It's going to pull away from the sides. And then we're going to add it to another, I'm just watching this mix here. We're going to add it into, put it into a bowl and let it rise for an hour. So really, this is just the beginning process. Okay, so we're back, and now that the dough has been well kneaded for about the last 10 minutes or so, you can see it's all pulled away from the sides of the bowl and has come together to form a nice, solid piece of dough. So we're just going to take this off of here, form it into a sort of a ball. I've coated this bowl here with olive oil. And we're just going to coat the top part of the dough like so. We're going to place it in the bowl, and we're going to cover it with a towel and let this sit for an hour. So we'll come back in an hour, and then we'll form it into a loaf on a cookie sheet with some parchment paper and the cornmeal. And this will all come together and make a wonderful bread. So it looked a little shady in the beginning, but it kind of all comes together once it's needed for the proper amount of time and the right amount of ingredients and so forth. So I'll see you in about an hour. Okay, so it's been about an hour and the dough is now risen. This is actually, for this Italian bread, it's going to be a 2-step rise. So we're not really out of the woodwork yet. We're just going to take our dough that's risen and turn it out of the bowl onto a work surface. And we're going to form it into a loaf. And it's actually going to rise again. So we've got the top of the loaf there. We're going to take our, what was this again? This was the cornmeal. This is the cornmeal. So we're going to take the cornmeal and we're going to sprinkle it onto our parchment paper and kind of spread it around a little bit with our fingers. And that's going to be the bottom base of the rustic Italian loaf. So we spread that around. We're going to take this loaf and we're going to spread it out a little bit. I know it doesn't look that fantastic, but that's okay. Nobody knows but you and me. And we're just going to spread this out onto this parchment paper. And this is actually going to sit and rise for another hour. we are going to take a piece of plastic wrap and that was for my Aunt Sandy, who makes fun of my plastic wrap not working all the time. So I wanted to show I got the big custom restaurant quality plastic wrap. So we're just going to lightly cover this with plastic wrap. We're going to let this rise for 1 more hour. And in the meantime, about halfway through, we're going to preheat the oven to 375 degrees. And that way, when this is done with the second rise, we'll move it into the oven. Okay, so this is after the second rise. I took a serrated knife and I sliced about a ½ inch into the dough. And that's going to help vent out any steam when it bakes. I also have some egg white here. And you're just going to brush the egg white, kind of slather it on just before we pop it in the oven. The oven's been preheating to 375 degrees, and it's going to bake in there for about 35 minutes, 35, 40, somewhere in there. And then when this is done, we'll have delicious Italian bread. And I believe, even though I know that the loaf looks like it's a little on the flat side, I believe that once it goes into the oven, that will change. I've had my ups and downs making this particular recipe before, so I'm not surprised if it's not going to work out now that I finally decided to film it. But we'll see. One can always hope that it's going to work out the best. That's the great thing about baking. Not always works. So here we go. We're going to pop it in the oven, and we'll see how it turns out in the end. Okay, so we're back, and our bread is done and out of the oven, and here we go, rustic Italian bread. Turned out really nice, probably the best that it's ever turned out for me. Thanks again for tuning in. This is going to be great with soup or spaghetti or whatever you want. Just give it about an hour to cool after it's out of the oven, and you're enjoying fantastic Italian rustic bread. Thanks again for tuning in, like I say, and we'll see you next time here on Crazy Dave's Kitchen.